Welcome to the Environmental Transformation Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Grady, and today's guest is Johnny Pujol. And Johnny, he is the co-founder and CEO of SimpleLab. SimpleLab is the pioneering the lab services, and they are making it easy for an everyday user to order lab services and get analytical results on their tap water and other water sources. And so, Johnny, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Sean. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, no, it's great. You guys have got a really great product out there, and I just wanted to, have a conversation about what you guys are doing in the water space and the analytical lab testing space. And I thought it'd be a great opportunity to bring you on the show. Let's tell us a little bit about yourself, if you could, Johnny, and what kind of services that SimpleLab and you guys offer.
Gladly. My name is Johnny. I grew up in Connecticut and went to Boston University. I studied economics. I was a passionate science fiction and fantasy fiction writer in my spare time. It's always been my hobby, especially like Harry Potter fan fiction. I just absolutely love that stuff. Really big into fitness and general well-being, health, etc. Anyway, in 2009, I moved out to Berkeley, California, enrolled in graduate school out here with a focus on electrochemistry and water treatment. Never completed my PhD, but did along the way have a good idea, I think. And truth be told, it wasn't even my own idea. It was kind of the precipitation of many bad ideas. Ultimately, we figured out through the course of piloting some technology, electrochemical arsenic treatment during my graduate studies, that there was a big gap in the market for people who wanted to understand their water quality better.
Mm-hmm.
There's the CCR, which some people know about, most people don't. There is, Google searching and blog information about your water quality, usually information that comes to you from filtration companies. And there was all this news about contaminated water and Flint, and the media and social media were getting a little bit wiser to the topic of environmental health and wiser to the topic of water quality. 23andMe had done an outstanding job presenting what I consider the tip of an iceberg, the kind of at-home diagnostic iceberg.
Yep.
And we said, you know what? I see the kind of constellation coming together. People are going to want more resources, more professional resources, access to environmental testing at home. And so we began by selling a very consumer-friendly water quality testing kit, a service called TapScore. And that was in 2018, 2019.
Okay.
And ever since then, I've been racing towards our future. And kind of in the last couple of years, we realized, this is much bigger than a simple consumer brand for water testing. There's a major opportunity to find efficiency, save money, increase speed, reduce headaches in lab procurement in general. Yeah. Anyone who's listening to the podcast, I think, who has collected water samples or ordered water samples or been involved in that very oftentimes kind of hairy and confusing world of lab testing and lab certifications and sampling protocols and results interpretations and flagged data knows that it is not easy, right? So yeah. we over the course of 4 or 5 years, our team has really learned how to make a difference in this particular arena of making laboratory testing procurement and laboratory reports just much easier and faster for everyone involved.
Yeah, I mean, that's great that you bring this up. I mean, it is complicated for an everyday person. I mean, how would you know which lab to contact to, run some analytical tests on your own tap water, and where do those, testing laboratories exist, and, what do I do with the data when I get it? How do I interpret it? And, how do I, evaluate the data against criteria and things like that? Those are all questions that, a normal everyday person would have a lot of difficulty doing. And so kudos to you with this your SimpleLab approach here. So you kind of went through that process. You realized there's a huge opportunity in streamlining the lab testing services. how did you weave in the whole digital innovation with this whole process too? Because, that is like making it easier for the consumer to, access the information and streamline the process.
Digital is always this like kind of contentious word, right? Because I mean, frankly, if you're trying to be a new business today in the water space, um, I think you have to be digital.
Yeah.
It's the manual stuff. Or I should say, the um, kind of old way of doing things is really refined, and in a sense, you can't really innovate too much there. I feel like water is such an old industry, and it's undergone so many points of refinement, and there are so many brilliant people, so much money, so much in technology that's been refined over, you could argue millennia. So
Right.
if you want to innovate, you got to do something different. And it just turns out that, the zeitgeist now is like digital innovation, which really, I guess, in our world just means using software to make certain decisions.
Yeah.
So I guess our core thing digitally is that we've gone to hundreds of labs across the United States, just now shy of about 225. And these are facilities operated by the biggest labs, Pace, Eurofins, SGS, BV, and the smallest labs, mom and pop shops that are running, under $3 million in revenue a year. But they've got a geographic advantage, or they have some kind of particular assay they can run that very few others can run.
Mm-hmm.
And we've indexed all of these labs' certifications, instrumentation, capabilities. And we said, listen, if you do that, you have what's called, in modern parlance, a platform, right? Or a marketplace. You know what all the labs are capable of doing, what their turnaround times are. And it becomes very interesting then to decide when a customer is collecting a sample and telling you that they're collecting that sample through an application of some sort. You can decide at that moment which lab to assign that sample to. As a result, you get the fastest report. You get results faster. You're not sending it to a lab you spoke to 2 months ago. You're getting a faster report. You're less likely to have some kind of interruption on quality control. Instruments aren't going to be down because you're sending it to a lab that is like ready, waiting, and willing to run that method that you need, the certifications you need, on a Wednesday.
Right.
And then the report you get back isn't just that, 10, 40-page lab
PDF
report.
document. Yeah.
You also get an HTML file. You also get a downloadable EDD or CSV. Now, the CSV is obviously already ubiquitous, but the HTML file and the fact that you get all of this data from all of these different labs, as it may be, in one singular format, regardless of whether it's a Eurofin sample or a Pace sample or a microbac sample, the fact that you get all these results back in one common language, one common API, one format saves a lot of time.
Yeah.
And especially if you're handling hundreds and hundreds of test kits.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
So there are some very simple advantages to the digital innovation there, which is just basic time savings. But there are also, I think, more maybe more exciting, more compelling advantages down the line, which is that you can suddenly use this network of labs around this country. And I'd say an almost tribally organized system of late has become a bit more like a network now.
Right.
And when that happens, it's more efficient to find the best labs. It's more efficient to identify which is the best lab for a particular test that you need, the fastest lab. And if you do that, more people do more testing. And if more people do more testing and they do it in a digitally native fashion, you have more data. And if you're smart and you're lucky, more testing means more data, means smarter decisions.
Could also mean better pricing too, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean,
Right.
I'll give you an example. If you send a sample, if you call up a random laboratory and say, "Hey, I want a microplastics test or pharmaceuticals in a wastewater sample test,"
right,
chances of that lab actually running that assay are fairly low. So you might have to call 20 or 30 labs before you find the lab that is going to run
you're
that
going to
test.
not waste, but you're going to burn a lot of time to finally find that right lab instead of just reaching out to your network and your system that's got already contracted or established labs already set up to take these types of samples and run them. I mean, it takes the time, a lot of extra wasted, I guess, time from the user. The one question I had for you when you kind of mentioned like, hey, I'm requesting a lab sample for this parameter of something. Does your system automatically identify the most effective, I guess, lab that has the capacity based on use or just, I guess, knowledge of what's going on? Or is there any opportunity for the user to select the lab they want, in the process? Or how does that work?
Both. So for our consumer store, mytapscore.com, the user does not get to choose the labs. They get a certified lab,
Okay.
and that's kind of it. I mean, they
You
can reach
streamline
out.
the process. Yeah, you streamline the process. You pick the best lab. Yeah, depending on geographic area, you know where it should go, and it's
Right.
just behind the scenes, black box. It gets done.
So if you're a professional user, however, you have full control over the types of labs that will be used. We have some clients that insist on a single lab being used, a single facility every single time.
Yeah, right.
And then you have other, more commonly, professionals come in and they say, hey, I don't really care which lab it is. They just need to meet these certifications. I need to submit these results to my Department of Public Health.
Right, right.
And so that ends up confining the list. And our algorithm just runs the same, regarding, it takes into account the user's specifications when they go to send it in.
Sure, sure. So you guys have started the company in around, you said what, 2018? Is that right? Or did I get that wrong?
It's such a fuzzy thing because in the beginning, there was some other, we were trying a couple of things that didn't really work out before this started to grab traction. And I'd say the traction of SimpleLab, of modern day SimpleLab, probably began in 2019.
Okay. All right.
Between 2017 and 2018, it was ugly. So I'm glad there's no historical record of what we were doing during those 2 years.
Hey, managing a startup is challenging, and I'm part of some of those experiences myself, and they can be challenging when you've got a great idea, you have a lot of interest and opportunities and potential growth, but it's challenging to get people to come on board. It's challenging at times to find the funding, and have the time and have the other experts come alongside you to help grow your product and system in the same, all in the same boat and same team moving forward, right? I mean, it can be challenging. I know you guys are in the kind of you're still quote unquote in the startup phase. Is that accurate to say, or are you moved past it now? You're in more of we're in growth mode here, or how would you characterize SimpleLab at this point?
Great question. It really depends, I think, on how you're viewing it. I think from in the long, I feel like the water industry operates on geological timeframes, and in that sense, we're a startup.
Yeah, right. Okay.
But in terms of I think penetration, we're probably slightly more mature than that now, given we have a pretty substantial footprint in both the informational testing sector, but increasingly among kind of professional users. I feel like we're like a graduating senior in high school, about to go to college, maybe that
Okay.
summer
Yeah.
before freshman year of college.
You're an intern now.
It's happening, puberty has happened, and there's some exciting stuff ahead, and we're looking forward to, I think, learning more, but we have a better sense of what we want, what we like.
Right.
And we're kind of going after it with, in the big true startup feeling is like, how the hell are we going to pay everyone next month? Right.
Yeah, right.
How are we going to find a customer? Right. Like that feeling is long gone. It's
Right.
now, okay, well, how do we
How
prioritize?
do we keep scaling this thing, right?
Yeah. Where is the next $100 million in revenue? Where are you going to find that? Like, and where do we have the right advantage? What do we need to do? To your point, staffing wise, like it's really one of the things I found most difficult is bringing on new team members is tough as a fast growing company, because your incumbent team has learned everything in the best way possible through failure, right?
Yeah,
Like
right.
there's no better lesson learned, right? So like your incumbent team, just inherently, we all kind of know things now about why we do things a certain way. And when you bring someone else on, it can be very tricky to I mean, we don't have the resources. We don't hand them a guidebook and put them through a 3-month rotation program, you know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Goldman
You're like,
Sachs might,
hey,
or, you know,
jump in and start helping.
right. So that is a real challenge, you
Yeah.
know. It seems so trivial at first, and you know, you think that that can never really be a challenge, but it really is. It's hard to get everyone on the same page when, you know, you most of the time haven't written everything down.
Yeah, right. No, I totally get that part, 100%. I mean, because you're so busy just managing the business that you currently are trying to grow, and you don't have time to put SOPs in place and training programs and mentoring program. I mean, it's like, no, we need help every day right now just to keep the lights on and keep growing with the clients that are demanding our services. I mean, it's tough. I get it. Um, and that's really great. So I know you've got some investment support from Mazarine Ventures. We just interviewed John Robinson recently on the podcast, and he spoke very highly of you guys. And so I just wanted to give him a shout out to John, and I know Johnny, you
Yep.
appreciate that. What's the relationship like that with a venture capital type investment company to help you guys grow? Talk a little bit about the importance of that.
I'll start with the, you know, kind of with John, with Mazarine in a sense, but I think it's just quickly worth noting there are so many types of these relationships, right? John, for example, hopefully I'm not getting too personal here, but Mazarine is incredibly devoted to the water sector, to like to hitting a home run. So it's like having additional team members.
Yeah.
I can go to Mazarine with any question, and I never am kind of embarrassed or ashamed or second guessing myself for asking that question.
Right.
Right. It's like a teammate.
That's
love
it.
And that is it. I think it's, you know, it's so it's rare for sure, and you can't even say who it's going to happen with. I feel like if you're raising money as a young company, and you, in the beginning, you're like, okay, I guess I'm spending Christmas dinner with these 9 people now for the rest of my life. I've never met them before. We met on LinkedIn, blah, 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 blah. But like, you don't realize how significant really the commitment is going to be.
Right.
And so you also don't know which ones are going to kind of feel a different way, you know. And so you know, time tells you, okay, this is the kind of investor who is going to go to bat for me no matter what. If it's 1 o'clock in the morning, they'll answer the call. So you have all types of investors, and I think I've learned a lot about how important it is that, and I was actually saying this in someone's LinkedIn post the other day. You know, I think a lot of entrepreneurs just try to get money. Like, all I need is money, and I'll figure out the rest. Because usually that's the most like starved resource in a sense. It's also the easiest one to kind of put your finger on.
Yeah.
But honestly, the money will come if you find someone who really wants to give it to you. Right. And it's like a matchmaking process. It's like a dating game. And you're out there saying, this is who I am. This is what I believe in, what we're doing. And you somehow need to get enough people to listen that you find the person that's like, oh my God, yeah, 100%, I'm in. Let's do this.
Right.
Those are going to be your best investors. And that's where you'll get the 10x return from the investor, I think. And it's very hard to make that relationship, because, you know, it's got to be exhausting being an investor, all the time being pitched, you know,
all the time. Yeah. Right.
You know, and just to.
But I think at the same time, you guys are also in that relationship looking for, kind of like what you mentioned earlier, a little mentor support too, right? You know, you could go to them with questions. They can give you some guidance or direction. They've got a little skin in the game too, to make sure that, you know, they're not just giving you, platitudes here, right? They're really trying to help you, you know, scale and grow too, right?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, we have the privilege of being a very successful startup, and, you know, knocking on wood here, never really had to face, I'd say, like, the truly most difficult conversations one has to have with investors sometimes. And like, I just shudder thinking what those feel like. You know, so I want to just acknowledge that I think the investor is always going to be on your side, but not, I shouldn't say always, like almost always.
They're going to try to hold you accountable too, right?
It's a very interesting relationship. You learn a lot from the relationship, just like you do from every other human relationship.
Yeah.
But I mean, this company for me has been all about relationships. My father is our CFO,
Yep.
and that has been a tremendously interesting way of kind of growing up. Um, working together in such an intimate way. A number of my closest friends were the kind of co-founders and first employees of this company. Um, and yeah, so like relationships are just have always been really vital. And I know there's other companies for which that's not true, where it's like, you go out there and you kind of, I don't want to say mercenary, but you get the best person for the job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I don't think there's one way to do it or the other. And the key thing is to just not get too obsessed with one of those two. I mean, trust me, it works if you hire really smart friends too.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
you need to be judicious. It'll sometimes bite you in the butt, and you'll regret it. That does happen to me too, but it doesn't ruin everything.
It's a learning process. I think any good manager or entrepreneur, you only grow by making mistakes, right? I mean, I've had my good fair share of duds that I've hired that I'm like, oh gosh, that didn't go well. And then I've had a handful that are just, are amazing, right? They will go toe to toe in the trenches with you no matter what. And, I just had lunch today with one of those staff, and yeah, I couldn't have been more happy to meet up with them because they don't work under me anymore. They moved on and things like that. But they say, you were the best boss, Sean. We did everything. It was like, wow, you just made my day because maybe I'm a little down the dumps, and they just sprinkled a little joy in your life, and you're like, wow, you had an impact, and it's great. It's just a good feeling to know, and that's the kind of thing you make good decisions and you make bad ones, and you just got to learn from them, right?
Work is weird. It's like kind of all we do. I mean, and then you got family time and your personal time as well. But like work is
Sure.
a big chunk of your life, man.
Oh,
It's like
100%. Yeah.
at least so I think yeah, the human relationship. If that's not a big part of it for you, I can't really relate.
Yeah. 100%. You got to have, and it's got to be what sparks a lot of your personal drive to get up and go to work every day. It's those relationships you're working with. And we talk about your product, and if we get back on track with that a little bit, your primary customers, Johnny, are who would you say your primary customers are currently, and where would you like to see your primary customers grow to or expand to?
Great question. So today our primary customer by revenue is still consumers, people at home. I mean, this is a market that we serve really elegantly, I think, at this point. Like we're beyond the growth stage. If you like view my business, I say we're a mature business when it comes to serving
Yeah, everyday
informational testing.
consumer, residential own
Yeah,
homeowners. Hey, I just want to test my tap water and see how good it is because I've been hearing horror stories about all kinds of stuff in my water, whether it's lead or PFAS or whatever, right? I want to know, right? They're calling you to get the answers.
right. And our kind of fastest growing group of clients is the small business. The
Okay.
small business can be like a home inspector, a plumber, a water filtration company.
Yep.
So while let's say consumers were growing 50% year on year, I feel like these other sectors are more like still doubling and tripling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's not too difficult to understand why. They're almost more like the consumer in a way than they are like a large engineering firm. These are teams of 3 to 25, 30 people, and many of the same questions. They don't have in-house analytical chemical expertise. They don't have in-house logistics support. And so plugging into SimpleLab is a big win. And for many of the same reasons. Now the product changes a little bit because they stop using TapScore and they start using SimpleLab.
Right.
Moving forward, I would like to continue that trend. There are, I hope I'm not exaggerating, millions of small businesses in the United States.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I think the number is millions.
Millions.
And it's a lot. They should all be doing more environmental testing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, just think of just the small mom and pop type, companies that have their own, permits for, wastewater discharge or something like that. They have minimal environmental compliance requirements, but they have an obligation to sample and report. This would be like the key, an ideal spot for them to pick up, a contract with SimpleLab to take on that testing lab service capability for them. I mean, yeah, totally. But I kind of think, I'm thinking out loud here, Johnny, though, but I mean, there are so many large companies that have so much data and analytical testing requirements. Then they don't have formal systems. They are still doing old school way of managing. And they'll have maybe one account, or maybe they'll have, every region like literally. I just came off a project where some of the clients that we're working with, and they had, I don't know, maybe 15 different locations. Everyone had a different lab. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
they're all using it, but they all need the same data at some point to run it, some, compliance reporting data. It's like, wow, these are the types of opportunities that you can go into a larger company that is, more sophisticated, but still, they're still struggling with this type of lab data management program. And we see it every day. So I think you got a lot of upside there for sure. I mean, there's, I think, a big opportunity in that space too. But I like where you're at, where you're saying, hey, let's get these little guys who need the help. Simplifies their process. I mean, that's great to hear. What are
But
some of the
to your point,
challenges?
though,
Yeah,
just
go ahead.
to not to interrupt you for too long, just this, we are trying to enter this larger engineering space,
Okay.
and we've learned something that is, I think, that has it's like it's like the scent. We caught the scent of something, which is that for us to succeed in these larger engineering spaces, we need to develop this lab API that I evangelize, every chance I get.
Yeah.
Which is that, like, our services can be plugged into your company's applications. You can
Yep.
configure test kits inside of your own website, inside of your own applications. Your teams, your customers can order test kits through your applications. And SimpleLab is just a logistics partner sitting in the back end, making sure everything happens smoothly. And nobody at your company needs to label kits, ship things, get
Yeah.
shipping labels,
Right.
organize coolers, stuff like that. I think that's going to be our kind of magnum opus. But it is, to your point, going to be very difficult considering how much entrenched behavior there is on
Oh,
this front.
yeah. I mean, some of the experience I've had is that you need to be able to talk to the IT professionals in these companies, like at
Uh-huh.
their level, right? I mean, it's not the buyer. Typically the buyer is like the environmental person who, like, yeah, I need a system to help me, but they're not the real decider. You got to talk to the IT people who run the systems. And that's not the environmental people's, arena, and they can't talk the talk, and they need, so you got to take a 1-2 punch when you go into these types of sales. At least that's been my
Mm-hmm.
experience. And then that way you've got this, ability to address both buyers' concerns. Yeah. And so this, some of the things I've learned. So, and
Agreed.
I'm sure that too. That's good to hear. You know, uh, what are some of the challenges that, most people don't realize when they're trying to contract with a lab? I mean, like, if you're an everyday person, you're
Person
like,
at home.
yeah, like, hey, I want to get a test run. I mean, like, some of the challenges. What would you say that you're solving for in your program?
Oh gosh, this is the question we think about all the time because it is very hard to imagine what it's like not to know what you know, right? Um, and so, we have a live chat support on the TapScore website, as you might expect. And, we're hundreds of conversations a day with people who have no idea what they're about to order or why they're ordering it, or,
Mhm.
and, I'll tell you, I'll try and rifle them off. It's what to test for. It's how am I going to collect the sample? Like, what is this experience going to look like? I've never done this before.
Yeah.
It's how do I make sure I'm getting it done in the right lab? It's, is this an expensive price or a cheap price? Some people come to our website and TapScore and they're like, "This is so expensive." I mean, let's be honest, it is expensive to spend $250 on a water test.
Yeah.
But if you were to try and get that same panel calling up a lab yourself, you'd spend easily 3 or 4 times that. And so there's the pricing discussion. Then there's a matter of, I think, like understanding the results.
Absolutely.
People
Yeah.
are very ill-equipped by nature to understand what 4 ppb of arsenic or 12 ppb of lead means.
Yep. Yep.
And then there's the matter of remediation or treatment at home, where people have to again learn a new language about filtration and treatment technologies and reduction and membranes and absorption and adsorption. And I mean, this is not the kind of stuff that you build a consumer business around, because it's just too much customer education normally
Yeah.
to do well. So, but nonetheless, these are the questions going through people's heads when they arrive on the scene. Usually something has happened to make them think. Almost everyone's doing this for the first time. So, I'd say 10% of our customers on the consumer side have done this before. Small number. They're coming into this for the first time. So there's a lot of learning. There's you have to hold hands. You have to be willing to hold hands for a while. We've decided, listen, if you're not ready to buy a test kit on mytapscore.com, go contact each of the labs you want.
Yeah, try it yourself and see how
Try it
complicated
yourself.
it is and challenging it is to set it up. And yeah.
And you can only embrace that strategy as a business model if you know the answer is going to point right back at you. So so consumers know precious little. They usually come in afraid because something happened in the news.
Yeah. And there's a lot going on there right now, right? I mean, there's a lot to be worried about. I mean, let's be honest, between lead and copper in your pipes and in your drinking water, and then also now PFAS being a big emerging contaminant that people are being exposed to. I mean, that's got a lot of concern for a lot of people, and especially in the environmental industry.
And it's hard not to fearmonger, right? Like we spend a lot of sweat trying to thread the needle between selling our product and not fear mongering. Like, we don't want to stoop to that level. We don't want anyone to think we're stooping to that level. And that means everyone from the kind of customer service person who's online at midnight on a Saturday to myself, we all need to be in unison about, like, hey, you don't need to be that concerned about 5 ppt of PFAS.
Yeah.
Right. Like, we don't run a business where every result is terrifying. We run a business where we're trying to help people understand this very complex and ambiguous world of toxicology and epidemiology at the same time as buying a water test.
Yeah. And and you can help interpret what the results mean to some level, but then the user has to take that information and do with that information. They have to make decisions on their own what they want to do with it. It's not your problem to deal with, right? You're just providing the information. Talk a little bit about, like, the user journey. Like, what's the ordering process look like for, a consumer? Hey, I want to order something from you guys. Yeah, I'm gonna do it.
Most people start with a reason they've come to us, a change in smell or taste, something in the local news, a baby on the way, and they either self-serve, going through our website and kind of identifying the problems. We have some the tools you might expect for, like, diagnosing your own issues, like a build your own test. Tell us what your concerns are. Tell us what you're noticing. Here are the tests we recommend. We have stuff like that. Now,
it's not kind of a guided process to get them to where they want to be with the sample request.
Yeah, but you still have 30 to 50% of people at home who just want to talk to a human being.
Right.
So we have live chat, we have email, we've got phone. And we try to do those things as efficiently as possible whilst being good listeners and providing support. It's kind of like, I mean, this sounds like I'm tooting my own horn here, but it's kind of like being a doctor. You have to listen to this weird list of symptoms. And you have to prescribe some testing in a way, but you can't do that we're not health professionals.
Right.
We're a business trying to sell test kits. So we're trying to do that to our kind of spirit and ethics and morality all the time, and it can be tricky for sure. The customer journey is for us is really about building and establishing trust
Right.
through that, through showing that kind of ethics, and showing that, hey, listen, we're not just trying to sell you as much as possible. We're certainly not trying to do that. We're trying to sell you what matches up to what you describe you're looking for, and somehow to articulate what is not worth your money, what is worth your money. And we're probably good at that, but not best yet. I mean, we still have ways we learn so much every day, really, but we're still getting better at that.
Right, right. So one of the benefits that I read and you guys have talked about, when you collect the data and the data is there, and now we know we have it, and the information is provided back to the user, there are some data sources that you're kind of using for evaluating against that result against criteria. Talk about how you're pulling that information and comparing it and helping the user understand what it means.
So someone who orders a test gets the results back. Historically, would just see a list of analytes that were tested, CAS number, detection, some quality control data, name of the analyst, maybe a flag of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just usually not enough to articulate if something's a problem or not. Maybe there's a word like safe or risk, right? But that's the conventional lab report. And we went in and we said, okay, we're going to introduce some basics like color and allow the user to see if an arsenic level is at a dangerous level by virtue of color and by virtue of the length of a bar, of a kind of risk bar.
Yeah.
That turned out to itself not be quite enough either, because you have to then answer the question, well, what is risky?
Yeah.
And so we said, okay, you got people out there who are religious about the MCL, and you have people who are out there religious about health goals and MCLGs and PHGs and about, like, say, their state's health goal versus the federal health goal.
Yeah.
And then you've got people out there who are really just trying to decide if they should buy bottled water or drink their tap water. And so you have these different, everyone is going to kind of look at the report with a different sense of what is their ideal. And so what we do is we allow you to look at all of your results and change the colors and shapes of those bars, tell you if arsenic is high or low, based upon a comparison to MCL, MCLG, public health goal, if you're in California, average of bottled water data that's been tested by our company. You can compare to different brands. You can also look at the average well owner in your area, average city water customer in your area, and compare to averages. If you're kind of a FOMO sort of person, you're like, where do I relate to my neighbors?
Yeah.
We're trying to give you as many ways as possible to like get a sense of where you're sitting.
So there's a bunch of data analytics that are running in the back end of this machine you've created, in a sense too, because you've got analytical data. You've also got some geospatial data, or where these samples are being collected from. Like this home lives here, and this house is 2 blocks over, and this is all becoming anonymized data for better reporting and better analysis of the trends in the region, right?
Yeah, we pull in a lot of public data, which anyone who has wrestled with this public data before, it's wrestling just begins to describe the experience. It's not easy, and especially if you're trying to do it on a national scale. It's one thing if you live in California. California does a great job of providing a lot of water quality data, these benchmarks. But if you try to do the same thing across the country, you quickly learn how different things are in New Hampshire and Florida and Texas and Minnesota and Vermont and Michigan and California, right? So, we've done quite a lot of work to, continuously ingest and compare people's samples to those data sources as well. And again, I think it's mostly there so that maybe only 5% of people really care about their average in their county.
Sure.
But when that person comes up and has that question, it's much better to have the data in front of them already than to have them come in through phone or email or live chat and have to have this awkward conversation back and forth whilst comparing county level data with their lab report. It's better to just do that natively. So we've chosen to kind of do all that work on the back end to make sure people can naturally just do that on their own.
That's great. That's great. Talk about, right now, emerging contaminants is the hottest topic in the water industry. I mean, really, how is Simple Lab positioning itself to support the testing needs for PFAS and consumers or industry or affected, you name it, who's affected by PFAS? Because I got a sense that this is going to be potentially a major game changer for you guys in your business at some point here, if it's not already becoming that.
Yeah, it already is. I mean, PFAS is, we ship hundreds of PFAS test kits, mostly to consumers, but increasingly to businesses. I think it feels a bit still like the Wild West in a planet that hasn't had a Wild West for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's, you have major issues with quality control with PFAS across the industry. Sampling is incredibly complicated. And you have the 3M settlement, which is a huge ticket item, just kind of strangely looming in our landscape.
It's massive.
Right?
It's over 10, $12 billion. I mean, crazy.
Some clients out there who don't even want to do testing because they're afraid of the repercussions. And there's other clients out there who are looking at as an opportunity to get the money they deserve to, fix up their treatment systems.
Yeah.
And you have everything in between. And then on top of that, you have the fact that the water industry is a kind of strange place that this whole conversation has landed. Because PFAS is a problem in your furniture too, in your food, right?
Right. Yeah.
I've heard some pretty smart people like, this isn't my area, so I'm borrowing from others here. Water quality isn't really your biggest PFAS risk.
No, it's like the Scotch Guard on your couch and the Gore-Tex jacket and the nonstick pan you fry your food with. And, I mean, it's like or it's in the food you're eating and you don't know it, or it's in the packaging at McDonald's at times. I mean, it's everywhere, right? That's the problem.
So how do you set a course and stick to it when you have all of these opposing factors? And we're just saying, listen, our goal as a company, make PFAS test kits no matter which analytical method you're procuring. Make the test kits as cheap, as fast to get results, as reliable as possible. And we're a logistics company. Focus, focus, focus. We don't need to have answers to all of those questions, but we do need to know, which labs can run PFAS by which method and give you results fastest, most reliably. And we're just really trying to hunker into that space and be very good at that. I think meanwhile, there's a storm around us in a sense. Oh. And we're just trying not to get swept up in it, but just stay focused at the logistics level.
Yeah, just that's a good point. Stay focused on that logistic level. Keep those analytical testing contracts tight with those labs, so that way, and make sure they're approved to do all the methods. You'll be in good shape, right?
Yeah, this is exciting times for lab world for sure.
Yeah, right. I mean, and I think you mentioned that there is a bit of some concern about the way you collect samples in this space, especially around PFAS, because it's like cross-contamination can come out so quickly, so easily with something else. So, what bottles are you using and what's all that stuff can be pretty tricky. So yeah, there's a lot to it. It's not that straightforward. Well, we talked a little bit about your connection with labs and setting up, kind of a standardized process to receive data from these, but maybe dig in just a little bit deeper of how that process works and what it looks like, just for a common everyday listener that would want to say, oh, well, how does that work? Maybe you can
order. How does a consumer order a test kit, or how does a business kind of set up a SimpleLab, which is more interesting?
Well, no, more like, how is SimpleLab connecting with the labs? Like, like you've got your EDD format process and you've streamlined that whole process, and explain a little bit to the listener. It's a little complicated because there's connections with these labs that, going to connect to your lab, and you got to just make sure it's just right. And it's got to be uniform, or one little decimal place off might, screw up the deliverable. And just
100%. Okay, I hear you. Okay, so there's this. I think one of the dorkier pieces of software is LIMS, Laboratory Information Management Systems, and I think every lab has one.
Should.
LIMS systems, LIMS systems.
Just say some don't.
I can't. I mean, honestly, some don't. You're right. So you need to know where the samples are, right, when they arrive. And someone needs to be keeping track of where they are. So for people who aren't familiar with LIMS systems, the LIMS system is what a laboratory uses to track the kind of life cycle of that sample as it arrives at the lab, moves through testing, data gets kind of accrues to that sample in a sense from instruments, and then ultimately gets reported back to a client. That process is managed by a LIMS system. And there are several commercial LIMS systems out there. And there are also many labs that have built their own LIMS systems. And this is probably the most interesting, boring story of all time. But I feel like the ascension of the U.S. lab sector through the 70s, 80s, and 90s very much mirrored the ascension of the computer. Like you had people opening and running these labs, engineers who were very interested in computers. So what do? They used computers to run their labs and their businesses. And every step of the way, they were investing in computers and writing their own software, initially in old coding programs, and over time upgrading them. But there's a lot of proprietary computer technology as a result, software, in the lab sector because of that confluence.
Right.
And I say there's these third-party commercial LIMS systems, but there are also many labs that use their own proprietary LIMS systems. And as a result, it makes it very complicated to get the data out of those LIMS systems in a scalable fashion across all labs. So we spend an enormous amount of time and effort making sure that our connection to those labs' LIMS systems is tight, is evolving in the right direction, getting smarter, gathering more and more data from every sample. Like in the beginning, in 2020, we were not gathering quality control data, right? It was just informational testing, and consumers, they don't need a level 4 lab report with all this information.
The result. This is the results I need to know, right?
Over time, clients got more sophisticated. Our ambition became more sophisticated. And we started including level 2, level 3, level 4 quality control data in our work with labs. And so I think if you know anything about LIMS and getting data out of labs, is that it's an incredibly complicated space of a lot of data wrangling, a lot of communication with IT teams. Many labs may not even have an in-house IT team, so you have to talk to this third-party team to coordinate changes to the LIMS system or to the EDD.
Mm-hmm.
And we are increasingly trying to tighten the connections between data that's coming out of the lab and data that's going into the report. And whilst doing that, we obviously learn a lot about what the lab's instruments are, what this lab can do. And the best labs, in our opinion, should win the most business. Like that's the driving principle. If you are very good at something, if you have the best turnaround time and the best quality control, and your certification, your reviews by the accrediting body show that your performance as a lab, performance under kind of blind studies, is doing very well, that should surface you as the cream of the crop. It doesn't today. It's very difficult for a business, much less an amateur, to figure out like how well does this lab perform.
That's
very,
true.
very difficult.
They wouldn't know. They don't know if they're NELAC certified. They don't know if they're, meeting their QA/QC requirements. They don't know if the lab results pass their hold time. They don't know all those things, right? So those are things that I think that's what SimpleLab's, kind of creating and demystifying for the users in a lot of ways, and taking the complexity out of contracting and making heads and tails of the data. I think you guys are onto something huge. You're being the back end logistics for lab. I mean, you're like the FedEx of lab, services. I mean, that's kind of, in a way, you could kind of, make an analogy there, and I think it's fantastic. Some of the listeners may be interested. Like, are there any cool projects you guys are working on that you're supporting that listeners may know? Like, wow, I didn't know SimpleLab was involved in these things, and that's a great use case for deploying SimpleLab for a project. I didn't think about that. It could be something if the right person's listening, like maybe an attorney or some other company that might have issues with maybe some litigation or large volume of data sets that, they're like, wow, I could streamline my business. Do you have any projects you could, kind of mention and without
I
maybe,
think, yeah, without naming specific names,
yeah,
only because I don't want to do something that someone tells me afterwards I wasn't supposed to say. Um, the kind of projects we do best are where you have very complex sampling protocols, where you have many different users collecting samples, or you have one user collecting many different types of samples, and you need to keep everything organized. And it's doubly more advantageous to use SimpleLab if this project takes place over time. Because with us, you can kind of plug and play. You tell us what you need to test for, how often samples are going to be collected, and everything else starts happening automatically. They get shipped automatically. You can track them automatically. This works well for things like PFAS sampling and the 3M settlement. It works well for schools and lead testing and LCRR. It works well for regular testing that industrial users might have to do, or regular cadence.
yeah,
And increasingly for things like lake management, where it is actually especially, I've been nerding out in the lake and surface water subject now for about a year, because I think it's one of these, it should be much more talked about than it is, which is the effect of climate change in particular on our surface water is dramatic,
yeah,
especially related to tap water. I mean, tap water at least goes through some form of treatment or filtration. There's professionals looking at it. Surface water is just sitting out there in the open, receiving all of the plastic, all the fertilizer, all the chemicals,
yes,
from the storms and the floods and the earthquakes. It's just, and that world, I think, is especially in need of better logistics for collecting samples. It is very frustrating to get out there on your canoe in the middle of the lake and realize you have the wrong kit. Right? You just wasted a whole day. And this happens a lot.
yeah. So environmental groups that are, overseeing maybe, like a watershed, like in my small town, I have an environmental group called the Friends of Sugar Creek,
Exactly.
they want to protect this natural resource that, runs through our town and our community. And it's one of the best smallmouth bass fishing streams in the entire state. Right. And they're like, we want to protect our water quality. We want to protect things from getting into the stream, and we want to know what the results are. So that'd be a perfect example of, using SimpleLab.
Bingo.
Right.
And it's fun too. Projects like the one you're describing, like, engage communities in very interesting new ways.
Yeah.
They get the data themselves. They can see nitrate levels. They can see salt levels. They can see. They can share these reports, and anyone can collect them.
Yeah,
Yep.
this is good. I love it. I love it. Well, I think this is a great. Those are some great use cases, Johnny. I mean, you've done a great job of getting this program and this company off the ground and running. I'm super, excited to talk to you about what we did today, and really proud of what you guys have been doing. Just seeing it, because I've been involved with contracting labs and running analytical and over my career, and I know the complexity involved, and you guys have done something that's out of the box thinking that some environmental professionals do this service, but only like for their own people, right? They don't actually take that same kind of service and extend it to like what you've done. Like, hey, I'm the Domino's pizza order of water testing, or the FedEx ordering of water. I mean, you could track it on my phone. That's people, they haven't thought through it like you have, and I think you've done a great job of creating this business, and it's pretty great. I love it. So how do people
Thanks
connect?
for saying that.
Yeah, how do people connect with you, Johnny, and get a hold of SimpleLab?
Easiest way is to send us an email, hello@gosimplelab.com. If you're just buying a water test for home and you're listening, go to mytapscore.com. Very, very interesting process to go through, especially if you're a professional. Going through the process as a consumer is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
At least I've been told. But otherwise, yeah, reach out at hello@gosimplelab.com. You can go to our website, gosimplelab.com, or mytapscore.com. Live chat there usually gives you the fastest answers. Our team is very, very on top of answering questions. And otherwise, yeah, shoot an email to Sean, I suppose, or the podcast,
Oh,
or me.
connect.
Always happy to talk.
Hey,
We
yeah,
are a
I
very
too.
accessible team.
That's right. Hey, look, we'll definitely put your contact information on the website, get it out
Great.
to everybody. Really appreciate you coming on the show today, Johnny, and good luck, best of luck for SimpleLab and all the good stuff you're doing. Appreciate it.
Pleasure and honor was mine. Thank you very much, Sean.
You bet.